Hello everyone and welcome to Politicast Episode 1, Not the Middle Ground, where we discuss all things political that plague our modern world, from the perspective of students and teachers alike. In our first episode, we take a moment to look at the nuclear history of North Korea and the standoff with the United States, through the eyes of a few students and a teacher here at CS Arts. Firstly, before we hear our many voices, I would like to take a moment to explain the structure I have in mind. I know this is an unorthodox approach, but I'm going to group each question together so we have some order or as much as possible in my first podcast. This will likely not be the only format I do the podcast in. Maybe I'll try a discussion for my next podcast in November. Before beginning, I want to say thank you to my parents, teachers, and friends who have supported me through this first episode. And also, if you are a listener and you have a suggestion about this structure or something else, I would be happy to hear from you. All of the thoughts and other stuff can be sent to the project Instagram at Politicast CS Arts. Question 1. Do you think what happened during the Korean War has had an impact on North Korea's supposed need for arming themselves with nuclear weapons?
So unfortunately, I don't know enough about what happened in the Korean War to answer that question. But I think just from like a human instinct standpoint, if you're, regardless of what's going on in your country, if another country or group of people invades, I think your reaction is probably to arm yourself.
The U.S. Really caused a lot of fear among people, or specifically North Korean people, during that time, and the government, just because they just got so destroyed.
The Korean War kind of built up their justification, whether or not it'd be a good one, to have nuclear weapons and have a method of defense in place should they face a rebellion from the South or from the US or China.
Yes, very much. So what ended up happening during the Korean War is that no side won. It was a stalemate and more of a message based off the Cold War, because we have North Korea, which is sided with the Soviet Union, or Russia more specifically, and then you have the U.S., which flocked to the side of South Korea, and North Korea, feeling threatened, would have a need to arm themselves with nuclear weapons, because the U.S. has the most nuclear weapons out of every other country, so it's only reasonable that they would have an eye for an eye.
I think that in general, it's good for any country to have nuclear weapons in case of an emergency, or if it comes to a point where having them and using them will become necessary.
Yes, because North Korea and South Korea are still having the war until this day. It's never really been established who won, really. So I think that North Korea do have the needs for nuclear weapons in case South Korea and the U.S. form an alliance to, use mass destruction on North Korea in case of North Korea just invading them again. So yes, I do think that they do have supposed needs.
Question 2. Do you think a country is stronger when they have defenses like weapons of mass destruction?
So there's a term in sort of weaponry called mutually assured destruction. That term applies to when another country has a nuclear weapon. The only way to ensure that they'll never use it against you is to also have a nuclear weapon. So if nobody had weapons of mass destruction, I wouldn't see the need for them. But because some countries won't give up those weapons, I understand why another country would want to essentially build those weapons as well.
It's kind of like if you don't get into a non-proliferation agreement, how are you going to do that? I'm not going to take away my missiles if you don't.
Yeah, so everyone would have to be on the same page if we're going to get rid of them.
I definitely do think that any country is stronger with weapons of mass destruction. For example, when the United States dropped the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima, it showed the world that the United States was a strong nation, and that it was the strongest nation in the world, and it showed that for the first time.
Yes, they definitely have a bigger flex element. They definitely have more firepower. It doesn't make you a better tough talker. It doesn't make you a better fighter, but you definitely have all the power of life and limb for everyone else.
I think they're stronger in the sense of having power than without having defenses, because in case any country may invade their country, they should have a right to own weapons in case another country may use weapons on their country. So yes.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily use the word stronger. I'd more say that a country is equal when they have defenses like weapons of mass destruction, because if you look at it across the globe, most well-developed countries do have weapons of mass destruction or nukes. It's not just the U.S. So if, let's say, North Korea, where having this nuclear weapon makes it an equal enough, quote-unquote, threat to every other country, I guess it would be more of a threat because North Korea is more of a hostile power.
Question 3. Do you think that North Korea and the world is safer with nuclear missiles, or do you believe that a treaty to disarm would be beneficial?
I mean, ideally, I would like weapons to be disarmed, since even if there's a very, very remote chance of one being used, it's going to trigger a chain reaction that would probably destroy our planet.
With the nuclear missiles, North Korea certainly has protection for itself. It could be seen as a little bit, selfish, but however, we do also have nuclear power. So if we were to ask everyone to disarm, that would put one of the countries, for no matter how short amount of time, at a disadvantage when it comes to firepower. We wouldn't be able to meet fire with like fire, and one of us could potentially be doomed.
I think it would be if North Korea if they were to drop these nuclear missiles, in case of an issue or an emergency that has reasoning behind it, I think that the world would be safer.
I think that if there were no weapons at all in the world, that the world would be just safer as a whole. But since there are weapons out there and that not every country has the right to disarm weapons upon individuals, I think that it's not really necessary if there were no weapons to bring a weapon out in the first place. But since the world is filled with weapons all over the place, I think that there shouldn't be a treaty to disarm.
I don't believe the world is safer with nuclear missiles, and I think North Korea makes the world a lot more dangerous with nuclear missiles, just because North Korea is more of an unstable or hostile power. I describe the whole situation of North Korea like a hostage situation, except with, let's say, 25 million hostages.
Question 4. As an ultimatum, the U.S. is demanding complete nuclear disarmament from North Korea without moving their troops in South Korea. Do you think this is fair to North Korea?
So again, that would be an information piece again that I can't really comment on. I don't know exactly the diplomatic affairs between U.S. and North Korea. I don't know the history of what they've done.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't think I'd be able to give you a educated opinion on that matter.
Okay.
Again, from a standpoint of human beings, though, if you had a weapon and you were right next to me and you were aiming that at me, I would probably feel a lot better if I too had some sort of weapon.
Well, yes and no. It doesn't seem very fair because, at least I'm gonna assume. I know I don't want to assume, but I'm gonna assume that Kim Jong Un thinks that, in the case of disarming themselves, that they're gonna do the same thing that they did in I forgot, was that Afghanistan or something, where they just took over. Right after they disarmed them, NATO kind of just went in and took over the entire thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think Kim Jong-un really wants to get overthrown.
Yeah. I don't think Kim Jong-un wants to get overthrown like Saddam Hussein or any of these leaders that have been, over the years, have been overthrown by, like, revolting peoples.
Or just like even NATO just rushing in and killing everybody.
Or international governments or other governments. Question 5. Do you think economic sanction removal leaves the door open for North Korea to build up their arsenal?
Well, I think that would, again, that'd be a little bit complex. I like the idea. If we remove that, they'll disarm, but then they would have to obviously let someone in, maybe not from the U.S., but from maybe the United Nations to inspect and ensure that they are disarming.
I think there's already some one like that in North Korea that I think it mostly focuses on human rights, but also in the nuclear inspections that other countries have been had to abide by over the years, like Iran and Iraq.
I think we're kind of using sanctions as a tactic to achieve our desired
like through
result.
Discussion. Or do like
yes, through we're kind of kicking them in the leg, like, hey, we kind of offered them some deals to do away with the sanctions should they, pledge to disarm, and they're like, no, this bullshit. We don't want these sanctions. Of course we don't. But I do think it's a little bit clever on our part to be using those sanctions. However, no, it isn't.
Well, I think the idea is that we can't really trust North Korea to disarm properly because, of course, they could be doing it secretly. Removing sanctions would be good for their country because they would be able to deliver food and resources for their people, but at the same time, we don't want to give them the power in order to be like a threat to any other country with nukes. So we're in this dilemma where, yes, we care about the people that are pretty much hostages in North Korea, but we also don't want Kim Jong-un to be setting up any more nukes. So it's like if we're gonna send people in, like we send people in for resources and stuff like that. It's like a hostage situation, as I said.
Question 6. Do you think it is fair to North Korea without modern defenses for the U.S. and South Korea to build up their military might and conduct military drills? There are over 100,000 troops in South Korea, both belonging to the U.S., South Korea, and various UN peacekeeping forces. Also, Japan and South Korea are under the nuclear umbrella of the U.S.
From a very uninformed standpoint, I don't think it's fair for one country to build their defenses while another is not allowed. Because what's to say that U.S. won't decide tomorrow to engage in war with another country? And if you have the weaponry, you are at a huge advantage. And human beings have been shown to be non-rational creatures. So we have no idea what we're going to decide to do as a nation tomorrow. So I can understand why
North Korea would do that.
I can understand why an entire country or group of people would want to build up their arsenal, given that how strong the U.S. military is.
So the drills really only, we're only really being instigators. Like, the sanctions are kind of enough. We're both armed and ready to fight. This is just another kick in the leg, as I put it.
Yes, I think it's completely fair. It's pretty much unreasonable for them to build up anything, because at this point it is pretty much overkill. But yeah, it's perfectly fair for them to keep building up their military strength. I don't think it's going to really do anything.
In case of war or any issues that arise, I think it is good for countries to already have military ready and in place in case of any problems.
I mean, it is North Korea's choice to either form an alliance with another country, and they haven't done so yet. So I just think that South Korea and the U.S. are just, they're prepared in case anything might come between South Korea and North Korea. So they want to have their military people ready. And I think that it's fair to conduct military drills in case of safety needs, and North Korea could do the same. It's their choice, though.
Question 7. Do you think that being in a world that has nuclear missiles at the government's fingertips versus a world without, which one do you believe is safer?
I mean, that one's a no-brainer. I don't think people understand how close we've gotten to destruction of our
Multiple times.
of the globe. Yes, I think nuclear threat is a real fear every day, even though we don't talk about it. So ideally, I would love a world where we only use nuclear power for energy, not destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if we completely supposedly annihilated all nuclear missiles and nuclear power, then yes, I'd feel safer if there were 0 nukes altogether. However, we can't trust that someone's not, hiding nukes in their basement. So, I mean, I'm glad that we have appropriate fire to respond to external fire. So, sadly, yes, I'm safe with my nukes.
I believe that a world with nukes is safer, because we can't trust any other country to not have nukes. And I know it's a bit of a tangent, but assuming that we're going to have an extraterrestrial invasion, it's probably safer to have nukes.
I believe that we should have no weapons at our fingertips, but as I said before, and that they shouldn't have an agreement to disarm weapons, because in case of destruction to a country, you want to be prepared to keep your country safe.
For me, it's circumstantial. I think in some circumstances, the world with nuclear missiles would be safer. It would protect us, and it could do good things. But in a world without, that could also serve the same duty as protecting us.
Thank you for listening to this first episode of Politicast. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in November.